As American and Israeli warplanes continue striking targets linked to the Iranian government, Iranian state television reports that the country's newly appointed supreme leader is expected to release a fresh statement very soon. During the night, Iran launched another wave of missile and drone attacks aimed at Israel as well as several Gulf nations. Newly released footage from Oman shows a massive oil storage facility engulfed in flames after being struck by what officials say was an Iranian attack drone. The unmanned aircraft appeared to fly directly toward the facility before impact, triggering a powerful explosion that caused major damage to a section of one of Oman's largest oil complexes. Authorities confirmed that one person was killed and several others were injured in the blast. Meanwhile, rescue teams were deployed after 2 oil tankers were struck by a vessel reportedly loaded with explosives and linked to Iranian forces. Flames could be seen rising from the damaged ship following the attack. President Donald Trump spoke overnight about how the conflict could influence global oil markets. According to the president, his administration is taking steps to ensure that oil continues flowing through critical shipping lanes. He stated that U.S. forces had prevented attempts to deploy naval mines in the region, devices that could destroy passing ships. Trump explained that military forces were moving quickly to neutralize threats at sea, claiming that dozens of hostile vessels had already been disabled in just a couple of days. While much of the international focus remains on the Persian Gulf and maritime security, Israel is also dealing with escalating tensions along its northern border with Lebanon. Overnight, Hezbollah launched more than 100 rockets across the border in less than an hour. Israeli Defense Forces officials told reporters that it was the largest barrage fired since the beginning of the military campaign known as Operation Epic Fury. Israeli leaders say they will continue targeting the Iran-backed militant group. At the same time, a live report from Tel Aviv was interrupted by the sound of air raid sirens. The alarms indicated that Iran had launched another wave of ballistic missiles toward Israeli territory. These attacks have become a repeated tactic by the Iranian government during the ongoing confrontation. Although the number of missiles fired in each wave has decreased compared to earlier stages of the conflict, Iran continues to strike both Israel and several Gulf countries. The reporter on the ground noted that he needed to put on protective gear as the situation unfolded. Back in the studio, anchors described how reporters stationed in Israel frequently monitor incoming missile activity. According to their analysis, many of the incoming missiles detected recently appear to be approaching from the east, originating from Iran rather than from the north where Hezbollah forces are located in Lebanon. Field reporters confirmed that during the previous 24 hours there had been coordinated attacks carried out by both Iran and Hezbollah. Military officials believe the two forces are synchronizing their launches to fire rockets and missiles at Israeli cities simultaneously. U.S. Central Command and the Israeli Air Force say they are actively targeting launch sites responsible for these attacks. One official explained that the military is focusing heavily on locating and destroying ballistic missile launchers before they can be used. This effort may explain why there have been longer gaps between air raid sirens sounding in Tel Aviv. The reporter then described the scene near a major highway in the city. Traffic was still moving along the expressway, but some drivers had stopped their vehicles and moved to the side of the road. Several people could be seen standing outside their cars, watching the sky. Moments later, a streak appeared overhead, the trail of an interceptor missile fired by Israel's advanced air defense systems. These systems are designed to destroy incoming missiles before they reach populated areas. Although fewer missiles are being fired at once compared to earlier in the conflict, the ongoing attacks are still placing enormous pressure on civilians. Many residents have spent long hours sheltering in underground bunkers. Another concern for Israeli officials is Iran's use of cluster-style munitions. These weapons break apart mid-air and scatter smaller explosive fragments over a wide area. Even when the main missile is intercepted, the smaller bomblets can still fall onto populated neighborhoods. Reporters recently visited an apartment complex where a single cluster munition destroyed part of a residential building. The incident highlighted how dangerous the situation remains for civilians living in affected areas. Back in the studio, Anchors noted that unexploded bomblets can sometimes remain hidden in the ground for days or even weeks, posing a continuing risk long after the initial attack. The conversation then shifted to international diplomacy. Joining the program was the United States ambassador to the United Nations, Michael Waltz. The discussion began with comments made by President Trump during a press briefing about the nature of the conflict. When asked whether the situation should be described as an incursion or a full-scale war, Trump responded that it was essentially both. He argued that the operation was designed to prevent a larger war while simultaneously confronting Iran's military actions. Trump also claimed that the operation had been easier than expected. According to him, Iran possessed thousands of missiles, but many of them had been destroyed before they could even be launched. He added that Iranian drone facilities were also being targeted and dismantled. The president further stated that multiple Iranian mine-laying ships had already been taken out by U.S. forces using specialized weapons. The television host then asked Ambassador Waltz how the situation is being described within the United Nations. Waltz explained that he often reminds other diplomats that tensions between the United States and Iran did not begin recently. In his view, the roots of the conflict go back to the Iranian Revolution of 1979. For decades, he said, Iran has supported various militant groups across the Middle East. These groups include Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Hamas in Gaza. Waltz stated that President Trump has made it clear that the United States will no longer tolerate attacks carried out either directly by Iran or through its proxy groups. He also acknowledged the dangerous environment journalists and civilians are currently facing. According to him, Iran's strategy of launching attacks in multiple directions, including toward neighboring Gulf countries and even regions as far as Turkey and Azerbaijan, is ultimately backfiring. At the United Nations Security Council, a significant diplomatic development took place. For the first time in many years, all members of the Gulf Cooperation Council publicly condemned Iran's actions. Bahrain led the initiative, and more than 130 countries co-sponsored the resolution. Observers described the move as historic. Many of the countries supporting the resolution have previously maintained neutral relationships with Iran. For example, Qatar shares one of the world's largest natural gas fields with Iran. The United Arab Emirates has long hosted large trade hubs connected to Iranian commerce. Oman has often served as a neutral mediator in negotiations between Iran and Western nations. Despite those ties, these countries have now openly criticized Tehran's recent actions. Waltz said that many regional leaders are angered by the attacks targeting civilian infrastructure such as ports, hotels, shipping routes, and airports. As a result, many Gulf states are now aligning more closely with the United States. He described this growing partnership as part of the broader coalition formed through the Abraham Accords. Another notable development at the United Nations involved the positions taken by China and Russia. According to Waltz, both countries chose to abstain from the vote rather than veto the resolution. While they did not actively support the measure, they also did not block it. The discussion then turned back to President Trump's earlier remarks suggesting that the conflict had already achieved many of its objectives. Hosts asked whether those statements could be risky given that attacks were still occurring in areas like the Strait of Hormuz. Waltz responded by pointing to the military goals outlined by U.S. defense leaders at the start of the operation. He claimed that Iran's command and control systems had been heavily damaged. Missile production and launch capabilities, he said, had dropped dramatically. He also argued that Iran's nuclear program had suffered major setbacks as enrichment facilities were destroyed. Additionally, groups such as the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas had been significantly weakened. Waltz suggested that several countries previously influenced by Iran, including Syria and Lebanon, might now begin distancing themselves from Tehran's leadership. If that trend continues, he said, it could reshape the political balance across the Middle East. During the interview, the hosts also highlighted the list of countries that voted in favor of the United Nations resolution. Among them were Pakistan and Somalia, which drew particular attention. The conversation then turned to the reaction inside the United Nations headquarters in New York, often referred to as Turtle Bay. Footage was played showing the Iranian ambassador addressing the council. In his remarks, the ambassador accused the United States of abusing its authority within the Security Council. He argued that the Council's actions were politically motivated and unfairly targeted Iran. The ambassador also claimed that Washington was obstructing diplomatic efforts to bring an end to the conflict. After the video played, the host asked Ambassador Waltz about the atmosphere surrounding the Iranian delegation. Waltz responded by saying that Iran appeared increasingly isolated within the international community. He emphasized that more than 130 countries had supported the resolution condemning Iran's actions. According to him, the unity among Gulf nations was particularly significant. Although those countries have historically had disagreements among themselves, they are now presenting a united stance against Iranian aggression. Looking ahead, Waltz said the United States plans to push for another round of snapback sanctions against Iran. These sanctions would reimpose strict economic restrictions on Tehran. He noted that President Trump had previously implemented a policy of maximum economic pressure during his first term. That policy was later relaxed under the Biden administration. Now, Waltz said, Washington intends to restore those measures with broader international support. He also pointed out that Iran's economy is already facing severe strain. The national currency has been losing value rapidly, and financial reserves are shrinking. Protests have reportedly begun spreading among business owners and merchants inside Iran. According to Waltz, these economic pressures are unlikely to ease anytime soon for the Iranian government.